everybody, it's EK from EK Gorman Designs, and I am sneaking in because I am part of the Craft Collabs Cute as a Button giveaway. It's a video hop featuring a bunch of different digital stamps from Cute as a Button. I am using the Alice digital stamp because if you know me, I might be a little obsessed with Alice in Wonderland, and this is such a fantastic image. And today I'm pulling out a bunch of different mediums, including my Daniel Smith watercolors, to show how to build layers of watercoloring on top of digital stamps. I know often people think digital stamps you're kind of locked in to how you can use them because they're printed, and that's not true at all. Actually, you can use digital stamps almost the same way you use stamped images. You just gotta be careful with the paper choices. Here I am using some watercolor paper I've actually found is surprisingly enough really inexpensive, but decent watercolor paper that actually goes through my printer. It's just thin enough that it will print through my printer, but heavy enough that water doesn't warp the snot out of it. And for anybody who thinks they're not a great watercolorist, this might be the project for you, because I'm showing how to build detail in a way that is you don't have to be an expert at watercoloring. So really all I'm doing at the moment is taking some good quality watercolors and dropping in a baseline of color on my image. I'm not doing any details, I'm not doing any shadowing, I'm just dropping in color and spreading it out throughout the image so that I have basic underpinning of color within my image. And the reason I do this is you can see, because it's watercolor, there's varying degrees of depth of color, especially like if you look at this blue, there's varying degrees of color depth here. And I think that helps you as an underpinning. So I tend to start on the side where my shadow is going to be, so the heaviest concentration of watercolor goes down there, and then I spread it throughout the rest of the image so it fades out onto areas where there's going to be less color. And the one thing I always tend to forget with my watercolor is it dries back so much lighter than it goes on, and that's just the nature of watercolors, right? So it dries back lighter than it goes on, so when you do the technique that I'm doing today and layering your whole project with different mediums, that fade back doesn't destroy what your intentions were. So while I know this is going to fade back, I know I'm also going to build the color up once the watercolor is dry. I wanted a really cool background. And when I say really cool, I mean not really cool at all, just gorgeous color blended through the sky, because it's Alice and there's something so poetically odd about her that a background with colors that you could see in a sky but not in the way that we're showing it today makes me excited. So I'm really just dropping in watercolor and then using a wet, clean brush to blend out the different colors together. This is brainless. There's no decision making here. In fact, it's kind of ugly right now. The technique I'm using of building layers goes through a real nice ugly phase, and you just kind of have to like push through. I grabbed a much bigger water brush here, if you can't tell, just to blend out the colors and help them blend into each other a little smoother, because my other brush didn't hold enough water to get a nice blend, and you can see like the edges are smoother. I'm also incredibly impatient, so you're getting to watch me dry my work. Yes, you can dry watercolor. Yes, you can see how it fades back a little bit. It's okay, because I'm layering techniques. I'm now pulling out my Derwent watercolor pencils. So I've dropped in a baseline of just an underpinning of watercolor. Now using my watercolor pencils, I'm adding more detail. So I've got a mauve color, and I'm using it in the skin tone to drop shadows. And I'm being able to hit the fine points here, like I'm giving her a bridge of her nose, I'm dropping in shadows along her hem lines and her shirt lines. Yes, I realize I forgot to do her legs. Don't panic. I go back in and color the shadows into her legs. The problem with watercolor for me is I don't know when to stop. So when I'm watercoloring, I just keep building layers, and I go through, like, this is not exciting yet with my underpinning. and I keep pushing it to the point where I've gone too far. I don't know where the fine line of stopping with watercolor is, so I've been layering medium like this for a long time because it helps me control over designing. I went ahead and scrolled in so you could see the detail in the face, and you can see that we've now got some depth and dimension in her face. Like, she's got a bridge of her nose, and her eyes have got more shadow around them. Her elbows got shadowed. Like, by using the watercolor pencil, I was able to really drop in some depth. I'm going to scroll back out because nobody wants to watch my fingers that closely. And I'm going to start the same detail on the dress. I pulled 2 blue colors, and I only ended up using one. I used a really nice Prussian blue, but I'm just hitting the accent lines the artist used when drawing the image. Now I dropped in a little extra shadow lines around the clock and around her arm, but for the most part you'll just see I used the lines that are already there in her dress created by the artist. And then I'm blending it out I mean, it's not even a heavy blend out. I'm just hitting it with water so it no longer looks like pencil and it now looks like watercolor itself. And I'm going to keep doing that to the different aspects of the design. And you can see I just hit, again, the shoes in certain spots. I pull out my watercolor brush and blend the color out to give the boots more depth and dimension. And again, just one pencil created a nice gradient in the boots that made them actually really quite interesting. Because I have a good underpinning for the hair, I'm going to use that same color as I used on the boots and follow the natural lines within the hair created by the artist. And again, just drop in a little water onto the colored pencil, and suddenly you've got some depth and dimension within her hair. I wish I had gone with a much bolder choice for the Drink Me bottle. At the time of coloring it, I was like, well, the purple kind of blends nicely into the back room, but I didn't know where I was ending with this. I will tell you, when I start these things, I have like a basic plan, and the plan was layer watercolor mediums, or layer mediums, really. And then I intended to cut the image down and mat it with multiple papers. Well, I ended up liking the background so much, there was no need to cut the image down and blend it with multiple papers. And you'll see eventually I pull out a sentiment. Well, I didn't know where I was going with the sentiment, and had I wish I could have gone back and made that bottle a whole lot brighter. With the grass here, I think you're able to see how you can make corrections. If you look at the back of the boot, I didn't hit the grass line, the horizon line well at all. But by bringing my watercolor pencil in, I was able to drop in some more of a horizon line that is a little bit more natural with her shoes. And I think my favorite part of this whole layering process is how the grass turns out. There's something natural, there's a nice depth to it. It works. Again, just touching. My brush is wet, it's not sopping wet, if you can understand the difference here. And it's clean. I just keep cleaning my water out, so my brush is always clean water. If you remember from my childhood, I don't know if your childhood had it, but those coloring books you would get, the color was already on the page, and all you had to do was take a clean watercolor, or take a paintbrush that had clean water on it, and you could paint a whole picture. That's what using a watercolor pencil for me is like, it's almost like color. Those coloring books of my childhood that I love so much. And that's one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of watercolor pencils. So now Alice has a good, oh wait, I have to get her lips. I was really afraid that if I took the pencil straight into her lip design, I would have too much color. So I'm really just touching my wet paintbrush to her lips and going back in now and hitting a couple places where I feel like I lost some detail. So her hair's got a little bit more detail. Consciously, the detail in the trim of her skirt was so fine, I didn't want to try painting around it. So I always knew I was going to pull out my white Jelly Roll pen and add white back into her skirt, just so you can see kind of some of that details. Now for the third layer of medium, I'm pulling out my colored pencils. This is my Spectrum Noir colored pencils, and I think, wow, I'm tired. My brain is absolutely fried right now, but I think these are a hybrid pencil, meaning they have both oil and, anyway, don't talk to me, I'm not the expert on this stuff, but I think they're a hybrid. But I like how they go on over other mediums. I tend to pull out my Spectrum Noir pencils when I'm absolutely coloring over other layers, and because they go on smoothly. Not true for me of all colored pencils. Not all go on over another medium so nicely. And all I'm using my colored pencils for is to accentuate the background. Yes, I could have used my watercolor pencils to accentuate the background, but I also ran a risk of turning it into mud. By bringing in a completely different medium and highlighting the work that's already been done in a soft, subtle way, I'm accenting it and bringing out the best of the background and not running the risk of mud. So you can see I'm just quickly smearing. It's not really smearing. I'm dropping in some colored pencil into the background. The lines got a little harsh for me, so I pulled out my Gamsol. I keep a little vial of Gamsol. It's a makeup sponge that's been cut up in there, and I just pour Gamsol into the bin. And then using my blending stub, I have much more control over the Gamsol without risking spilling it all over myself. This might be one of those live and learn moments, because I learned you can't just stick your blending stub into the Gamsol without spilling it eventually. Yeah. So I have this little container filled with Gamsol, and it works out perfectly for me. But I'm using my blending stump and just softening the harshness of the colored pencil in the background. And I really, like I said, the background becomes real fun for me. Now I wanted to ground the image just a little bit more. I haven't used Distress Oxide over a watercolored colored pencil background before. And look at how it blends out and smooths the whole image. Like, I'm stunned with how well the Distress Oxide smoothed out my edges, which gives the whole image a nice hazy look that I'm just kind of in love with. Yeah, a little obsessed at the moment with what happened here. It's nice to find out new tricks and techniques. I realized the dress needed just a bit more detailing, so I'm using my colored pencil to just hit the dress with certain detail lines. Now, time for the sentiment. I pulled out my snarky sentiments from Tim Holtz because they're snarky sentiments from Tim Holtz. And the moment I saw "This is my cup of cares, oh look, it's empty," I thought it was perfect for Alice, especially since she's holding the Drink Me vial and the white rabbit's kind of annoying her. And this is where I wish the Drink Me vial had been a whole lot bolder and brighter. I pulled out a 6x6 card frame, and because it's a watercolor image, I used a lot more double-sided adhesive than I normally would, because I really wanted to make sure that the paper that has been slightly warped could go down onto my card frame without a problem. Peel back the stickers, line it up. You'll notice I didn't trim the card up, I didn't mat it out with paper, I just left it here like it was because I think the background became really special. Thanks for tuning in today. Make sure you continue along the hop. Leave me a comment in the comments below letting me know which of the mediums you were most fascinated watching. And until then, happy crafting.